One day, I hope I can meet a handsome man who can sit still, follow the rules, and complete tasks in a consecutive order. Said no interesting woman ever. Hey, Dan here, and this is video 2 in my series on adult ADHD. Just so you know, in the description, we're going to include all the videos in the series. So if by chance you like to jump around, if by chance you don't like doing things in order, feel free to go to video 4, then back to video 3, then to video 6, whatever works for you. I'm presenting them in the most logical order in my head, but hey, our heads are probably all a little different and a little wacky. So look in the description there and jump around as you'd like. The point of this video is to help you figure out if you have adult ADHD, and if you do have adult ADHD or you think you do, how to go about getting a diagnosis, including some tips on finding a doctor that will actually support you in finding that out. So my degree is in psychology, and one of the interesting things with psychology and psychological diagnosis is that it's always nuanced. There's a spectrum. We are all sometimes a little bit bipolar or a little bit ADHD. If one of the traits of ADHD, which it is trouble focusing attention, trouble controlling attention, we all have that sometimes. Some people have mood swings, a little bit from day to day. Some people have larger swings. Some people have enough that they could be diagnosed as bipolar. Now, I'm really simplifying things, but it's important to understand this, that diagnosing something to do with our psychology is not as simple as being like, you're tall, you're skinny, you're fat. You can't x-ray necessarily. Now, there are advances in using brain scans to diagnose ADHD, which is awesome that we are getting there, but it's something to know that it is nuanced. And at least in theory, part of the diagnostic criteria in psychology is looking at, does this thing have a negative impact on your life? So for instance, if you go see a psychologist and you list 5 or 6 symptoms of a condition, and they're like, how's your life? And you say, it's awesome, it's great, I have a wonderful job, things are great at home, I love my family, I'm healthy, you're probably not going to get diagnosed. It's part of the criteria. It's a little weird, but part of the criteria is basically that this is having an adverse effect on your life. And this is probably going to change moving forward as psychology opens up more to positive psychology and a holistic view of people. But traditionally, this is how psychology looked at people, right? And this probably plays a role in how ADHD is massively overdiagnosed in some places. Cultures like America, which require people to work really long hours, and it's all about how much you can do, tend to diagnose it a lot more, because probably people who have ADHD or maybe even don't, but just can't keep up with some ridiculous workload, their doctor is more likely to say, hey, you're obviously struggling in life. Where someone may be living over in Spain, like where I'm filming this video, maybe they have ADHD and they do struggle, but they're able to find a balance. They have more family support, they have more time with friends, which by the way is one of the important lifestyle changes to do to be successful with ADHD, is to spend more time with friends and with people who love you and people who you love. So maybe someone who's living in a place like Spain and has more of that positive interaction with people and a smaller workload ends up not being diagnosed, because even though they have the same issues with attention, when they go see a psychiatrist, they're like, yeah, well, you seem fine, your life is functioning all right, you don't have ADHD. Apart from that, you're going to see big differences in countries, right? Some countries, like America, are very pro-drug. So if you go to a doctor, they're like, hey, take these pills. Other countries are very pro-lifestyle changes. One of the great things about ADHD, and you're gonna see this in the video where I go through all the ways to really be at your best if you do have ADHD, is there are a ton of things you can do. Yes, prescription drugs, but also you can make a ton of lifestyle changes and a ton of life design changes that can have as significant or more significant of an impact as medication can as well. And what's really cool is, in my experience at least, when you treat some of the more negative symptoms, when you follow some of these lifestyle changes, or even if you take medication, you usually eliminate or reduce some of the negative symptoms of ADHD, but you keep the positive, which is really cool. So you don't lose your spontaneity, your creativity, or things like that if you're treating it properly. I'm not saying take 8 million pills a day, but if you're treating it properly, you actually keep all the good traits and reduce or eliminate the bad, which is really awesome. So here are some traits correlated to ADHD. One is you thrive under pressure. You probably do your best work at a deadline. And if there is no kind of deadline or no kind of pressure, you feel it's very difficult to get things done, at least at the same rate you otherwise could. You love to improvise. You do things unscripted. You would much rather jump into a situation and find a solution than follow step-by-step instructions. You love to stay busy and move forward and get things done. Ultimately, you're not someone who loves to sit still. If you're out for dinner and you're finished your food, you're the person saying, hey, bring me the bill, we're ready to go, let's go to the next bar, let's have some fun. We don't want to sit here and chit chat when we could be doing more things. Now that leads me to another ADHD trait, which can be impatience and getting frustrated easily, including trouble sitting still and getting frustrated if things aren't moving along. As well, we can often have trouble multitasking and switching focus. Now there's an interesting ADHD trait which often leads to people being confused and thinking they don't have ADHD, which is called hyperfocus, which is when you really get into something and you can focus for hours. Now, when you don't really understand what ADHD is, you think, well, I can sit for hours and focus and get things done sometimes, so there's no way I could have ADHD. That's when you can't focus, right? No. So what ADHD generally is an inability to control your focus and to switch focus basically on command. And yes, other people can apparently do it. I don't know how they do it, but apparently they can. And so what that can be is often people with ADHD get into hyperfocus. Like I can sit and write for hours. I put on big headphones. I like trance music personally, and I can really get into things and focus for long periods. But if someone comes and tries to interrupt me during that time, like I'm like a vicious lizard that's been poked from behind, or an alligator, so I'm like turning around and yelling at them, because it's really hard to get out of that focus basically. And this is a really common thing. That's why I say ADHD people, we tend to have trouble multitasking, switching, going back and forth all the time. When we are into something, we like to stay in something and not jump around a bunch. Now, ultimately, no one is really great at multitasking. It's not the right way to get things done and really be productive, but it's especially a no-no for us. And as you probably know, you find it very frustrating when people try to interrupt you when you're in the middle of something. Now, ultimately, you're going to want to see a doctor to get properly diagnosed. And I'll share some advice a bit later in the video about the type of doctors to see, because this is really, really important. But there are a few things I want to share beforehand. First is that as children, I know we're talking about adult ADHD here, but this affects whether or not we've been diagnosed as kids. As children, boys are 3 to 4 times more likely to be diagnosed with ADHD than girls, but actually boys and girls are just as likely to have it. That means that sometimes boys are overdiagnosed and often girls are underdiagnosed. Because of this, girls are 3 times more likely than boys to be diagnosed with depression when in fact what they really have is ADHD. And this brings me to another important point. ADHD is very, very, very often missed and something else is diagnosed instead. This can be depression, this can be low self-esteem issues, this can be anxiety. In many cases, the underlying condition is actually ADHD. And the ADHD causes behavior which can lead to more anxiety. It could lead to trouble with school or with finances, with your job, which can lead to self-esteem issues or lead to depression. And the wrong doctor will diagnose the simple condition. They'll be like, oh, you're feeling depressed, you must have depression, and not go deeper to see that actually the condition is ADHD. And when you treat the ADHD, everything else goes away. This is really common. And this is why it's really important to see the right kind of doctor. Now, ideally, you want to find an ADHD specialist. These are going to be the doctors who will properly understand the condition, a condition which is now one of the most commonly studied conditions, but for many, many decades was very understudied and there was very little information for doctors on it. So you want to try to find a specialist if you can. There's often large waiting lists. If so, get on the waiting list, wait it out, it will be worth it. If there isn't an ADHD specialist in your area, look for a psychiatrist who specializes in children. I know this is adult ADHD we're talking about, but generally a psychiatrist who specializes in children will have a lot more experience with ADHD and they'll be able to diagnose it even in an adult as well. Now I should mention, just because you've had ADHD as a child does not mean you will have it into adulthood. A certain amount, I haven't actually looked up this exact number for this video, but I remember it was about 50% of people basically outgrow ADHD and a lot of people don't. Now, one last thing, just a word of caution. When you talk to friends or family about ADHD, you're very likely to hear a lot of BS. You'll hear things about how you just need to focus, or how, yeah, everyone has ADHD, or whatever else. And when I hear this, now that I'm really educated on the subject, it sounds the same to me as when people tell me about how vaccines are a grand conspiracy, or that fluoride is put in the water as some way to poison all the people. Like, yes, it's a conspiracy of fluoride to put the dentist out of business. Like, come on, people. People who actually have ADHD, they have a different wiring in their brain. And there are lots of ways this shows up. And I'll give you 2 examples. Now, I'm not a doctor and I'm not diagnosing anyone here. This is not medical advice. But these are 2 situations where people with ADHD react very differently than people without ADHD. The first is work environment. Generally, people with ADHD do really well in busy environments. I can take my laptop, sit down in a busy bar with the middle of a football game going on, put on my headphones, and I can work. And I will work better there than if I'm sitting in a library. Generally, a little chaos, a little movement helps people with ADHD actually relax, focus, and think. The extreme cases is there's stories of people with ADHD who go and drive, 150 miles an hour just so they can slow their brain down and actually think. The second is the reaction to medication. Now, unfortunately, especially in the drug capital of the world, America, ADHD medications are often abused by students just trying to get the best grades and push themselves to stupid limits in a ridiculously competitive academic environment. We don't have to get into that, do we? But when these students who don't have ADHD take the medications for ADHD, the stimulant one specifically, they're basically treating it like speed. So they get more energy, they think faster, they probably get a lot of anxiety from it, they'll probably get more nerves from it and that, and it allows them basically to not sleep and just work like crazy. When people who actually have ADHD take stimulants, it actually slows our mind down. What it does is it stimulates our prefrontal cortex, which allows us actually to slow down our thinking and relax. So in many cases, we actually feel calmer and less anxious with medication, even though in normal people, a lot of these medications cause more stimulation and more anxiety because they are a stimulant. That is a complete difference in how we are wired. So when you hear people say things like, oh yeah, I get that way sometimes, like yes, we all do. I was explaining this earlier in the video. Anything to do with our psychology is very nuanced. And there's certain things, if you pump someone full of sugar and deprive them of sleep, they will definitely act like someone with ADHD. They will have trouble focusing and all that. But that does not mean they have ADHD.